This is Nifty Culture. I'm Pio, and this morning I have the pleasure of speaking with a very talented digital artist, digital sculptor, has been featured on Super Rare, featured on Nifty Gateway for multiple drops. Metageist. How's it going,
Hey,
Metageist?
very good. Honestly, seriously top of the world at the moment. I've got to be honest. Living the dream.
Glad to hear. Glad to hear. So, I'm excited to show some of your work and excited to kind of share, what's next for you too. One thing that I always like to ask people is, can you give us some context on your creative beginnings? I think, I'm particularly interested in hearing about yours, given, the kind of nature of the work, the digital sculpture. But to me, the digital sculpture is kind of unlike the other digital sculpture that I see in the space. I think it's very original, colorful, and I can't wait to dive into those themes. But yeah, can you talk about your creative beginnings and, maybe your creative history up until you got into NFTs?
Yeah, sure. So typical story, I suppose. Always the sort of kid with a pad and pencil, always drawing when I shouldn't have been drawing. So that cliche sort of daydreamer in the class. Sort of struggled with focus, but always loved being creative. Used to be telling stories all the time, creating characters and worlds. Even into my early teens, I still had this like really vivid sort of I liked making up games and playing. I was reluctant to grow up, and now I'm seeing how that my early drawings that I've kept, actually I've got loads from years six years old onwards, and the stories that I wrote there, I'm the same person now, I think. So I was always going to be doing something creative. I wanted to do special effects in films when I was a kid. I wanted to be an animator. I sort of got through school. I always just liked art and not much else at school. Didn't have a good time at all. Was definitely the nerdy kid that got bullied a lot and couldn't wait to leave. And I couldn't wait to not be told what to do anymore as well. So I didn't go to university. I just self-taught with magazines. Photoshop, basically, things like that, from about 16 onwards, 17 onwards. This is right at the beginning of this, version 2 of Photoshop or something like that. And I sort of scraped through a bit of a college course that was it's supposed to be about an introduction to animation. And by the time I joined, they'd replaced the animation syllabus with web design. And I was pretty disappointed in that. And I ended up getting into web design because it was 1999. And it was everyone was getting into web. That's where the money was to be made. My first job, apart from Potato Factory and being a postman for a while, was web designer for a really cool little studio. They had a couple of really big clients for a small studio, so I got really lucky there. So I did Flash animation and design as sort of HTML, CSS, basic web design. I designed the front end for the UK's first internet banking, and I got really into that for a while, but got a bit cocky and ahead of myself and quit to start my own design, to be a freelancer as a designer when I was 20. Failed pretty poorly at that, miserably. Spent most of the time just spraying graffiti and designing t-shirts, and none of that made any money. I ended up working in a computer game store for a bit, really wishing I'd never quit the web design job, and then tried to be an entrepreneur again. I worked for Thomas Cook doing editing holiday photos for brochures to make holiday destinations look a lot better than they really are. It's pretty unethical stuff, really, when I think back, really bad. And then I quit again. I started another company. Initially it was called Metageist. So this is a long time ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, something like that. Metageist was just a word that me and my mate made up. And it had the logo that you've seen, like my avatar with the sort of creepy shadow guy with the goggle eyes. And then I ended up teaming up with another guy and starting a web design company. And I did a lot of album covers and logo design. And I did that for about 7 years. We ran a successful company, and then I wanted to leave again, so I sort of said goodbye to those, kept my shares for a little bit, enjoyed that for a while, and then went as a digital artist predominantly, and an illustrator. So lots and lots of Photoshop experience, and After Effects and vector work and stuff like that. So, but always commercial, never just selling my artwork. Apart from skateboards, I designed skateboards for a while. But I always just really enjoyed that creative process, and there wasn't really a way for me to monetize it. beyond sort of selling posters and things like that. So actually I sold a poster in like 2013 for Bitcoin, and I wish I'd paid more attention to that at the time. Mate gave me £5 worth of Bitcoin for a poster. And then years later, he was like, check it now. And I still had it. And it's like £100. I was like, shit, I really should have paid more attention to that. So that was my first sort of interaction with crypto. And then I discovered virtual reality art tools about 4 years ago now, roughly. And at that time, I was pretty successful freelance digital illustrator and graphic designer, doing community work, doing stuff for like council-funded community outreach and teaching kids and adults how to use design tools. And I discovered Tilt Brush on the VR headset, and I just decided that I wanted to do this now. And I didn't know how to monetize it, so I was contacting my existing clients and saying, is there any way we can do anything with this? And I ended up in schools teaching like 30 sort of like 9-year-olds how to use Tilt Brush and create like a sculpture garden. And I did charity work, and I went to like terminally ill children in hospitals in London. And because there's an interesting sort of crossover with therapy and virtual reality that really fascinates me, because I find it very therapeutic. So I was bringing Tilt Brush into these kids that couldn't get out of bed, and sort of teaching them how to like playing games and fly around and all that sort of stuff, but also that isolating yourself, taking yourself out of the hospital ward and into virtual reality was really good. So that's what I was doing when I sort of bumbled into NFTs during lockdown happened. A lot of people have the same sort of story. Lockdown happened, a lot of artists was suddenly like, how the hell am I going to make money? My events, I was doing performance work as well in VR, like doing VJing at festivals. I had 2 festivals lined up, they were both cancelled. Schools closed, that cancelled. And then I saw Giant Swan sell a Tilt Brush piece for a couple of $100, and I was like, what is this? And then that's it. From that point on, it was like I got into Super Rare with my first piece. Coldly bought it, and from that point on, I've just been absolutely in love with crypto art, crypto itself, the NFT community, and I'm a massive ambassador for it. And I can't help but like pull people in. I'm like the Pied Piper, just like with a VR headset dancing down the street, and come on, and it's working out. And a lot of people are sort of thanking me for that at the moment, for sort of like trying to share that, because a lot of my friends were also really struggling. So yeah, that's my story in a nutshell. And I'm just like super happy to be here. I'm just really loving it at the moment.
I love the story, and it sounds like, you had the chance to work as a digital artist, before it was common to work as a digital artist. And it sounds like you got exposed to a few things, like you talked about Flash animation and talked about some of the, that Photoshop experience that, kind of gave the foundation. And, I've interviewed quite a few artists at this point in the NFT space, and I find that the ones that have that like lengthy experience digitally, a lot of times their work is some of the most polished. And I think I alluded to that at the beginning, that I think that your digital sculpture is really polished and original. And so, we'll kind of get into that. Can you dive a little bit into the entry into digital sculpture specifically? And I'll pull up some of the work while you're talking about it. But I'm fascinated because obviously, Photoshop's one thing, Flash animation is another thing, but then the work that you're doing now, I would think, is a few iterations deeper into the rabbit hole. So I'd love to hear about that jump, from where you were at and from being like, a designer and Photoshop and Adobe Flash into the work that you're doing now.
Yeah, so I've wondered a lot whether or not this was the best way of doing things, but I hadn't never done anything in 3D. It had always eluded me. I was a little bit sort of intimidated by it, I suppose. I hadn't tried doing any modeling in Blender or anything, or Cinema 4D. We had a guy that worked for me at one of the businesses that I ran, and he did all the 3D, and I just like used to watch him. It's just like, used to look so complicated. It's like 4 views. It's all wireframe, and it wasn't quick enough, it wasn't responsive enough, it wasn't like you couldn't doodle or anything like that, and it sort of looked like a technical thing rather than a creative thing to me. Obviously that's not quite the case, but getting in, so this piece for like on Super Rare, the Astro Shaman, this was this sort of sums it up really. I saw this NFT space, I thought, do you know what, I've been doing commercial stuff forever. I just want to have fun. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try this 3D. I'm going to try this 3D thing out. This is the first first 3D piece like I put out as a I'm a 3D artist. You can tell from the way it is, and it's still got the same sort of style as what I do now. I used a brush tool to build up volume so that you can see every part of it is a brush stroke, so you can see how it's been made. There's no assets, no modeling tools. It's just all brush strokes. And I just thought, this is worth a shot. Didn't think COVID was going to last as long as it was. I thought my work might come back, but I'll jump into NFTs and I will use it as an excuse to try and do something completely new to me. So this is captured from inside Tilt Brush. There's no rendering or anything. It's just filmed from inside the headset after I'd drawn it, and you can fly a camera around it. I added some sound with a good friend of mine. From that point on, I've continued to just carry on down this route. So it's been a little bit. I've got imposter syndrome like every day because I'm a 3D artist, as it were, but only for like 18 months or so now, surrounded by the Blake Catherines and the Bill Ellises and the fuck renders and all these people. So I'm well aware that I see my stuff as sort of a different kind of artwork, I suppose. It is VR art predominantly. So I got into 3D through VR, and I think that's quite an interesting story and an interesting angle to come at it from. And most pieces, almost all of them, I don't know what they're going to be until they're done. So I put the headset on. I enjoy that space that I can fall into. I usually have music. I've usually had a beer. I find a flow state, and then I just draw until I've got something that I'm happy with. So yeah, so you can see that these are mostly all gravity sketch after the first couple because it's a bit more. You can refine it afterwards. So it's improvised. They're improvised. So the creatures are born in VR and they're for VR. They're born in the metaverse to a point, to a certain extent. They're very much influenced by the tools themselves. So there's lots of stuff that can't be done, but there's you can be creative with it. And I think in a kind of sappy poetic way, I kind of think like the metaverse is working through me. I'm inspired by the tools that this is how things are going to be done. This is how modeling will be done. As soon as augmented reality, virtual reality sort of collide, or rather merge over time, why on earth would you do anything three-dimensional on a flat screen anymore? These are still early days, and you are definitely limited by the tools. But so that's kind of what these things are. So like this one, for instance, this is designed. This was Metageist bought this one, and it sits in VR, and it's like a bandstand. You stand under it. You can have events at it. It's up on in virtual reality in VR chat. SuperReb did this amazing group show last year, and this was part of that. It's got sound that plays, and the idea is that in the future, I'm always thinking about how these are going to fit into the future metaverse. I think they're going to be. I like to believe that at some point they may well still be visible in the future, and they're like these early sort of clumsy, early rudimentary sort of interactive spatial NFTs with utility. So you could have one of these in one metaverse platform, and it could teleport you to another one, or it can just be a place. You could have it as over a stage in a festival or whatever.
No, it's awesome, man. And I think that there's a lot of character in the pieces. And I'm actually going to just pivot right now and show this drop on Nifty Gateway, which I think, we were just looking at that piece that was 3D. And then if we look at this piece, right, you can kind of see where that one came from, right? Am I right about that?
Yeah, this isn't an animation. This is a live recording of me puppeteering. I sped it up, but so I put the headset on. I scribble until something cool comes out, and then I sort of refine it a bit, and then hit record. And you can't see me because I'm not picked up in VR, but I'm like in there, and I'm like the size of this is like, if you imagine this thing is anywhere between 3 and 20 feet big, and I'm moving pieces of it around and trying to so when it blinks, I'm actually grabbing the eyes, slowly pushing them into the head, slowly pulling them out again, knowing that when it's sped up, it's going to look like a blink. So a big part of what I'm trying to communicate is that this is about the process, very much about the process. It's about the things that come out in when I'm drawing, whatever comes into my mind, and I'm just fascinated by nature, but the sort of nature that isn't necessarily what everyone else is drawing. It's not necessarily apes and dogs and bears and stuff. It's like the really weird stuff that nature does. If you imagine nature, I often think about simulation theory and about how, there's creativity in nature that just eludes me. I'm like, are you sure it's just like survival of the fittest? Because this, you look at a carnivorous plant, or you look at some, there are a lot of things are just like someone's having fun here. I'm not necessarily saying there's a god, but I'm saying there's something is having fun here. And so I like to play in VR, in the metaverse, as a designer, as a creator, but I'm a conduit for the tools themselves. And these are life forms. These life forms are a side effect of me playing with the technology. Yeah, and I want, this one's quite cute in a way, to me anyway. I think some people might be horrified by it, but I think it's kind of cool.
No, I think it has that cartoony feel, and I think people can appreciate it. And the other thing is, I had no idea that this was, a lot of this stuff was basically performance art, right? In a lot of ways, if you're physically doing it. And I feel like if people saw, like, if you set up a regular camera next to yourself while you're creating this and showed like a head-to-head of the creation process and the final product, that they'd be really fascinated. And, to think that this is improvisation, this is like on the fly performance by the artist, I think would give people a lot more context. So
yeah, you're right. Absolutely. I did a TED talk. Somebody in the chat said they think they recognize it. They might have seen my TED talk, and I forget that not everyone has seen it. So I did a TED talk when I'm in VR and I'm talking. I'm doing this talk while I'm modeling, and to me that's like, I've done it. But there's so many people, and the NFT space is so noisy now, and you've got to remember that, you've really got to spoon feed your story. If there's something about your artwork that's different perhaps from some others, then you're right, it needs to be done. I need to get back on that, really. And I definitely want to do some live shows, any sort of big sort of NFT focus shows. I would like to be on stage doing visuals where there's DJs and stuff. That's something I really want to do more of as well, so you can really sort of show, because the tools, I absolutely love them, and that's how I ended up doing the schools and the hospital stuff. It's like, I want to show people how easy it is to have fun and be creative. That's the easy bit. The start is the easy bit, and then actually everything else is where it slows down and gets a lot harder, like creating the NFTs, creating the story, navigating the space, doing the textures, doing the lighting, all of this stuff. Every single drop on Nifty Gateway is me, like at the edge of what I can do, like, if you know what I mean. And there are things that I can a lot better now, but my these guys were $60 each. I'm taking collectors on the journey with me from the beginning of me using 3D tools and seeing me get better and better. And I've got grand plans for the next few years for much more sort of physical stuff, but also interactive stuff, but also big immersive spaces and things like that, using portals and all sorts of things like that. And these are inspired by the Cambrian explosion, like the early days of Animalia in the ocean, where there was this massive burst of life. So I was listening to this podcast about like really early evolution, and that inspired the whole Metaphyla series. So they evolve over time. So Metaphyla 1 and Metaphyla 2, each of the characters in Metaphyla 2 and Nifty Gateway is an evolution of one from the first series. And then in November, I'm doing a new Nifty drop, and it's going to be the third sort of evolution stage in their evolution. Probably only 4 of them, and then another 4 later on next year. But they're only going to be accessible to people with the first Metaphyla, I think, or at least some of them are. So, and each character is going to have like this story, and it's very, very loosely based on an evolution. So this is a predator. There's like an apex predator. But I've got some plans for the third. I'm really excited to do the third stage of evolution, but I haven't got long, so I've got to knuckle down really before the drops in November 5th, I think.
Okay, awesome, man. Well, when I look at this work, like, again, I just see the sort of art that's inside of your brain coming out. And even though, you're saying you were inexperienced with this and that these are rudimentary compared to your newer stuff, it's still very polished in its own way and it still works. And I appreciate you saying that whatever you see on Nifty Gateway or on Super Rare is at the edge of what you were capable of doing. And when we kind of look at the progression, like, I'm excited to see what comes next. And I mean, what's going to come in a year, right? So that's what people should think about when they see your work. But again, you're coming through, like you're using the tools, you're excited about the tools, some of the tools are new to you, but what's inside is coming out, and every time it comes out in a very original and polished way. So I think a lot of people can appreciate that. I'm going to switch to the most recent drop on Nifty Gateway that came with the physical sculpture, because I think that it's so cool. And the coolest part for me is definitely the physical. Like obviously the digital works, but once you see the physical with it, it's so cool. So can you talk about this drop and how this came about? Oh, yes.
Yeah, this is it. This is I made this, we got a spare in case any didn't get delivered properly. So I've got like a spare bronze. I was really worried about any getting lost in the post or whatever. So I've got this guy. Yeah, so this is an idea. I've taken it down now. I was going to show this sheet with lots of drawings on it, but I've got Cyclops was an idea I wanted to do, and I still want to do another version of something similar to this, but I haven't seen. I'm not going to claim to be the first because you get roasted for that. But
I
haven't seen a 3D printed physical sculpture with an AR marker on it before, and I really wanted to do that. And this has been like it's hanging over me, and I really didn't want someone to do it before me, but in the NFT space at the very least. So so this drop was the Hierophant and the Cyclops. The Hierophant was easily the most ambitious 3D piece I've ever done. I found it incredibly difficult, to be honest. It was very hard. It was really up against the wire. I had a lot of sleepless nights with that, not knowing what on earth I was doing with rendering and blending and textures and things like that. But he was kind of like, the demon guy is, he represents, the Hierophant is a classic old archetype. It is about belief systems. It's about who you turn to sort of guide you in your belief systems. And I was thinking about that in terms of Bitcoin and how and crypto and how there are belief systems that are fed to us by institutions, and they can be religious institutions or they can be monetary, banking, and people just come to terms with the fact that they're not really investing is for other people, and they're not going to make any profit on their ISA really, and inflation is a thing that can't be fought, and all this sort of nonsense. So I've done this like evil person guarding a portal, and he's holding a Cyclops, and the Cyclops is like this propaganda delivery device. So it's like a metaphor for like TV and media and tabloids and things like that, that the powers that be, the banks and the financial institutions, use to not only sort of keep us distracted, but also turn us against each other and all this nonsense. So that's the dark sort of weird sort of fantastical side of it. So it was hand sculpted in Gravity Sketch and then 3D printed on this 3D printer, Form 2, that was basically gifted to me by the EU before we shot ourselves in the foot and had Brexit and left overseas. I got like a grant as a small business, and I bought one of those, and it was a really good decision. And I 3D printed it, and a friend of mine really knows his stuff when it comes to 3D manufacturing fabrication. And I said, like, I want to do a series of pieces. What can we do with this? He said, like, initially he said, like, we can do high detail, but if you can keep it as one solid piece, we can do that a lot easier. So that's why it looks the way it does. So it's got quite a lot of surface detail. And I spent a long time fiddling with this until I was really happy with it. I wanted it to be organic. I wanted it to look like part of the Metageist universe, but I also wanted it to look like a machine, like kind of like it's very steampunk, I suppose. Clockwork. And the marker is the most important bit. So I created this like radial QR code, like a little design of my own. Each of the 3 different Cyclopses has their own. There's the pearl, the bronze, and the gold. And they deliver new NFTs to you. Those, I'm in the work. I've got 3 designed at the moment that are going to be, so everybody who bought a Cyclops is going to get a new NFT of equal value, equal rarity of the Cyclops that they got. So the pearls are going to get a 1 of 5, and Sven, who got the gold, is going to get a 1 of 1, and then
Sven, let's go, Sven.
Yeah, and then we got 15 bronze, and so they get a 1 of get a 15. and that's been pushed back a little bit because I had a couple of amazing opportunities lately to curate some shows, and I really wanted to do that. So hopefully my collectors are being patient. I think they are. I think they understand. But the really cool thing is I'm curating a show from inside the Cyclops. So you visit your Cyclops. I've got a bunch of art. I've got Coldy, Sutu, Trippy Yogi, and a bunch of others. There's like 15 artists, and they're all creating artworks for the Cyclops. So you go up to your physical, you stick this up on like the mantelpiece or whatever, you hold your phone up, and it will deliver you three-dimensional augmented reality sculptures. And the artists can either gift you an NFT or give you a link to an NFT, or it's just to show some artwork. There's no promise of NFTs from any of those guys, but it's probably every week it's going to be like, go visit your Cyclops, see what you've got, learn about the artist. So it's a way of delivering art. It's for artists delivering to avid collectors who are obviously really interested in cutting edge sort of mixed reality technologies. And for me, it's just like having a gallery show from inside a physical sculpture, which is something I've wanted to do for like I say, for quite a while. And it's coming together. It's just a little bit delayed. So I'm keen to get it done and get these NFTs out and the physicals out. But the artists have done some amazing stuff. So it's making me revisit my own pieces for it because they've got some really good stuff coming from the other artists. So they might be cross-chain. They're not going to necessarily be nifty, or there probably won't be any nifty NFTs from any of the other artists, but mine will be nifty gateway NFTs that are going to be gifted via the Cyclops. So it's a way of connecting collector and artist in a really weird, unique way.
No, it's so cool, man. And I love how like you have all these ideas inside of you, and I can tell like as soon as the technology catches up, or as soon as you realize that it can be done, you really push it to the limit every time. So as this VR, AR technology keeps going, I can't wait to see it, man. In years, it'll be nuts. I guess speaking of that, before we wrap, what's coming next for Metageist? Like, what can you share about upcoming projects, or what do you see coming down the pipe?
Yeah, what you say about technology coming along, and NFTs have given, this wasn't doable until NFTs came along, really, in terms of like the Cyclops, because who would buy it? You needed to have art collectors that were interested in supporting an artist and also playing the game and being interested in further NFTs and things like that. So that's why I was waiting. Didn't think, I was just going to make one and put it on Etsy or something. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. So NFT, as soon as I got into NFTs, I can do that weird Cyclops idea now, tie it into the universe. On that note, I've got a nifty drop on November 5th, but I'm also curating a show in New York the day before at a party. Seems to me it's going to be like the NFT party of the year, as far as I can tell. I can't really, I don't want to share too much because of sworn to secrecy, but I think it's going to be public really, really soon. It's a big deal. I'm one of 10 artists curating for it. And I'm working on an evolution of the Cyclops where, like, this may or may not happen. It depends a lot on logistics because I've got to get it to New York and I've got to work with my partner on the physicals. But I'm going to do one that's made of iron and resin, mix iron and resin, and so it's magnetic, and then have magnetic parts. So I'm going to work on a sculpture that looks like one of these, but it's got legs. It's going to be an evolution, probably an evolution of one of the Metaphyla 2, the what's he called? Oh God, Splinterbug on Nifty Gateway. And there's going to be maybe 3 other pieces as well. So it's the Metaphyla series. It's Metaphyla like Evolution 3, at least one physical. I know that I've got like a plinth in this nightclub in Manhattan. So if it all goes to plan and I can get off this island, I can get into New York and I can bring my sculpture and it all goes ahead, then hopefully I'll be at this nightclub with my physical sculpture on display and some other NFTs on digital displays with my drop the next day. So it's all coming together beautifully. So really excited about that. And other than that, it's just getting the Cyclops artwork out to the buyers. And then who knows? I mean, you can't predict this, can you? It's just, who knows what next year's going to hold. I'm here for the long haul. I am going to, even if the unthinkable happened and a bubble burst and NFTs disappeared or Ethereum got hacked or whatever, I would still be hanging on for dear life till the end of NFTs if that was the case. Although I actually think it's going to be the way value is transferred in the world. forever.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And whether or not there are like macro dips in the NFT market, I think you're safe. Playing this game. I don't think that this is going away anytime soon. And if anything, I think it's going to gobble up everything. So, so cool to hear about that. Hopefully that party is something that some of our viewers might be able to get exposure to. It sounds like it'll be an absolute jam. Everyone, make sure you check out Metageist's work. Super rare, nifty gateway. Follow them on Twitter at Metageist VR. Anywhere else they can find you?
Thank you. No, it's well, I'm on Instagram as well as Metageist. My stories, I do a lot of behind the scenes on my stories
Nice.
on there. Other than that, it's more about Twitter, and I'm on all the platforms really except for Foundation at the moment. But yeah.
You got to drop those behind the scenes on Twitter. Everything's on Twitter now.
I know, mate. I know. I don't know why I do that. I think it's just I get nervous about that stuff. I get nervous. So I put it like to a smaller crowd. I get nervous about Twitter. I get nervous about shooting myself in the foot or whatever.
The people want to see it in the chat. Everybody, before we wrap right here, just tell them that we want to see it on Twitter. But no, this was a real pleasure, man. Can't wait to see the drop in November. Can't wait to hopefully meet you at NFT NYC in New York. And this was awesome, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for asking me. I really appreciate it. And I love the show.
Thank you. Thanks.